It happened so fast that even now, he struggles to remember the order of it all. One phone call while he was standing in the kitchen, coffee still warm in his hand. A voice on the other end, formal and cold, telling him not to come back to work. Before he could ask why, the line went dead. Minutes later, his bank app refreshed and every account showed the same word, restricted. His phone buzzed again, this time from his landlord. Then from a friend who had heard something but didn't want to get involved. By noon, the life he had spent years building was already gone. By evening, he was sitting on the edge of his bed, staring at nothing, trying to understand how one ordinary morning had turned into the worst day of his life. He didn't cry at first. Shock held everything together. He told himself there had been a mistake, that things like this didn't just happen to people like him. He had done everything right, or at least that's what he believed. A steady job. Bills paid on time. Plans for the future. But as the hours passed, reality crept in. Calls went unanswered. Messages were left on read. People who once filled his weekends suddenly had reasons they couldn't help. The silence was louder than any argument. It made him feel small, disposable, like he had been erased overnight. As darkness settled outside his windows, there was a knock at the door. Not urgent. Not demanding. Just familiar. He almost didn't open it. He wasn't sure he could handle pity or questions or someone telling him everything would be fine when it clearly wasn't. But when he did open the door, there was no lecture waiting for him. No judgment. Just one person standing there with tired eyes and a quiet resolve. They stepped inside without being invited, set their bag down, and sat beside him on the couch like it was the most natural thing in the world. "I'm not going anywhere," they said softly. In that moment, surrounded by everything he had lost, something shifted. The job was gone. The money was frozen. His future felt like a blank wall. But the presence beside him was real steady, unshaken by his sudden fall. He realized then that losing everything had revealed something he never truly understood before. When the world turned its back in a single day, there was still one person who refused to leave, and that would become the only reason he survived. What came next? The day began like any other, quiet and ordinary, the kind of morning where nothing feels wrong until everything is. He woke up early, the room still dark, staring at the ceiling as if it held answers he didn't yet know he would need. His phone buzzed on the nightstand, a sound he would later replay in his head again and again. One missed call. Then another. By the time he sat up, his chest already felt tight, like his body sensed the storm before his mind could catch up. By noon, his world had cracked open. The company he had given 15 years of his life to long nights, missed family dinners. Weekends sacrificed was shutting down, no warning, no severance, just a cold email and a locked office door. He stood outside the building with a cardboard box in his arms, watching other people do the same, faces pale, eyes empty. His name badge was still clipped to his shirt. He hadn't yet accepted that it meant nothing now. The drive home felt unreal, like moving through someone else's life. His phone rang again. This time it was the bank. Then the landlord. Then a number he didn't recognize but somehow already feared. Each call peeled away another layer of security he thought he had built. His savings were frozen due to an unresolved dispute. His credit cards declined. Bills stacked up faster than he could process them. When he finally reached home, the silence was heavy. The lights were off. The house felt smaller, tighter, like it was closing in on him. He dropped the box on the floor and sat on the couch, staring at his hands. These hands had worked, built, provided. And now they felt useless. By evening, the final blow landed. A knock at the door. He opened it to find someone holding papers, speaking calmly, professionally. Legal language. Eviction notice. 30 days. The words blurred together, but the meaning was clear. The life he knew was slipping through his fingers. He closed the door and slid down against it, his back pressed to the wood, his breath uneven. Everything he had worked for, his job, his stability, his sense of worth had vanished in a single day. He didn't cry yet. He couldn't. He just sat there, staring at the floor, wondering how a life could unravel so fast. And that was when he heard footsteps behind him. He expected silence. Instead, there was movement. Soft, careful. Someone sat beside him on the floor without saying a word. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't offer solutions or forced optimism. She simply stayed. She had known something was wrong the moment she walked in. The box on the floor. The look on his face. The weight in the air. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked, breaking in places he didn't know it could. He told her everything, spilling the day out in fragments: job gone, money gone, house at risk. He waited for the moment she would pull away, for the disappointment to show in her eyes. It never came. Instead, she reached for his hand and held it like it was still valuable, like it still mattered. She told him they would figure it out. Not he, they. The word hit him harder than anything else that day. Over the next few days, reality settled in. Friends stopped calling. Messages went unanswered. People who once laughed with him at dinners suddenly became busy. He noticed how invitations disappeared, how conversations changed when money and success were no longer part of his identity. But she stayed. She sold things quietly, without telling him at first. Jewelry she loved. Old keepsakes. When he found out, he felt shame rise in his throat, but she stopped him before he could speak. She reminded him that love wasn't a transaction, that she hadn't chosen him for what he could provide. They cut expenses down to nothing. Shared meals became simple rice, soup, bread, but they ate together. Nights were long, filled with worry. But also with whispered conversations about memories. About dreams they once had and dreams they still dared to imagine. Sometimes he would wake up in the middle of the night, panic crushing his chest, convinced he had failed completely. And every time, she was there, half asleep, pulling him back from the edge with nothing more than her presence. He began to realize something painful and beautiful at the same time. Losing everything had revealed who truly mattered. And in that quiet, stripped-down version of life, she remained. Just when he thought he had reached the bottom, life proved him wrong. The eviction date drew closer, job interviews led nowhere. Rejection emails stacked up like evidence of his worthlessness, or so his mind told him. Each week. Regret to inform you cut deeper than the last. He watched himself change, the confident man he used to be faded into someone quieter, heavier, unsure. Mirrors became uncomfortable. He avoided eye contact with strangers. Shame followed him everywhere, whispering that he was no longer enough. She saw it all. She noticed how he stopped talking about the future, how his laughter disappeared, how he apologized for things that weren't his fault. One night, she sat across from him and told him something he would never forget. She said she didn't need him to be strong all the time. She needed him to be honest, to stay, to keep trying. When they finally had to leave the house, packing what little they could carry, he felt hollow, years of memories reduced to a few bags as they walked away. He couldn't look back. She did, quietly, then squeezed his hand tighter. They moved into a small, cramped place borrowed from someone who barely knew them. It wasn't home, but it was shelter. And somehow that was enough for now. In the darkest moments, when he felt like disappearing, she became his anchor. She reminded him of who he was before success defined him. She spoke of his kindness, his patience, the way he had always shown up for others. She reflected him back to himself when he couldn't see anything worth saving. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, something shifted. He started trying again, not because he believed he would succeed, but because she believed he was worth the effort, and that belief began to seep into him. It didn't happen overnight. There was no dramatic turning point, no sudden miracle. Just small steps, a temporary job, a chance meeting, one yes after countless no's. Stability returned slowly, cautiously, like something afraid to be lost again. But by the time his life began to rebuild, he understood something deeply important. What had saved him wasn't money or opportunity, it was loyalty, presence, someone who refused to leave when staying was hard. He looked back on that single day, the day he lost everything, and realized it had stripped his life down to its core. It had taken away illusions, comfort, and false security. But it had left him with the one thing that mattered most, her. When he finally stood on steadier ground again, success felt different, quieter, less important. Because now he knew the truth most people learn too late. Everything can disappear in a moment, but the people who stay, that is what defines a life. And as he held her hand, stronger now, not because life was easy, but because they had survived it together, he understood that losing everything had given him the clearest gift of all. He had learned he would never leave. The story doesn't end with applause or sudden wealth. It ends in something quieter and far more powerful, standing there, looking at how far they had come. He realized that the worst day of his life had also been the most honest one. It had stripped him of titles, paychecks, and pride, but it had shown him the truth about love, loyalty, and what really lasts when everything else falls apart. He understood now that success can leave without warning, money can vanish, and plans can collapse overnight, but the person who chose to stay when there was nothing left to gain, that was rare. That was everything. She hadn't stayed because she had to. She stayed because she believed in him when he couldn't believe in himself. As life slowly moved forward, he carried that lesson with him. Every small win felt bigger because it was shared. Every setback felt lighter because it wasn't faced alone. He no longer feared losing things the way he once did because he knew what truly mattered could not be taken away so easily. And if this story reminds you of someone who stood by you in your darkest moment, or if you are that person for someone else, hold on to that bond. Because when the world walks away, the one who stays becomes your whole world. If you felt this story, don't forget to subscribe and stay with us, because the stories that matter most are the ones that remind us we reign not alone.